We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Welcome to this episode of Modern Day Missionaries. Today, we are so glad to be joined by Charley Elliott. Charley is the executive pastor of global ministries for Gateway Church in Dallas, Texas. And Charley, you were also a missionary in Africa and Latin America for a decade. And that's where you met your wife, Kelly, on the mission field. We got to hear a little bit more about that. All four of your sons were born overseas, I hear. That's an experience.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And Charley is passionate about helping global leaders build healthy organizations that are full of the presence of Jesus. I love that. That is a great statement.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Stephanie, it's awesome to be here with you guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. It's so good to have you. And Charley, before we dive in, I am going to shoot a few rapid fire questions your way just to get us going, just to let people get to know the human side of you before we tap into your leadership guru side. So, okay, we're going to start easy.
My non-human side. Well, get the human stuff out of the way.
That's true. That did sound kind of weird, didn't it? All right. So we're gonna start easy. Who's your favorite child? No, I'm just kidding. That's not a real question. Every parent's worst nightmare question. Okay, how about this one? Favorite food from Zimbabwe? That's where you were, right, when you served Zimbabwe and Mexico.
Yeah, easy. So in Zimbabwe, you've got to have some sadza with some beef stew and some stewed vegetables like stewed rape with a sauce, and you eat it with your hands. So,
what is that flavor profile like?
So sadza would be a cornmeal, like a maize cornmeal that you have it in it's a staple in a lot of Southern African countries. They have different names in different countries, Ugali and kind of Swahili nations, but you cook it up real thick, kind of like cooking up grits porridge. And then, but you add so much that it's thicker than mashed potatoes, and it just comes out as this really thick, kind of looks like mashed potatoes. And you would take it and make a ball. You like pinch off a piece, make a little ball. And then you have like a little bit of meat or vegetables in like a gravy type of sauce that you dip it in and pinch a little bit of the protein, and you just eat it up. It's awesome.
You're making me hungry. That sounds delicious. How about Mexico? What was your favorite food when you guys lived there?
Oh, hands down tacos. Come on. Real tacos. Yep. Tacos de pastor and tortillas de maíz hechos a mano. Yep.
Come on, you cannot beat a fresh taco.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, next question.
So, you got to tell me, what was your favorite Peruvian food?
Oh gosh, I've never had someone throw a question back at me. I would say my favorite, they call it the king, is lomo saltado.
Oh yeah.
Okay, have you had lomo saltado?
Oh yes, absolutely.
I feel like it's just hard. It's hard to beat. I mean, those strips of steak and the tomatoes and the onion over the French fries and the rice with that sauce and the ají
We're gonna
amarillo.
be so hungry by lunchtime today.
Really are. I'm eating right after this. I'm officially starving now. Starting off the morning. Yeah, I feel like you cannot beat lomo saltado. There's so many good dishes, as you know. There's probably 1,000 you could have said, but that's my go-to.
Yeah,
that's my go-to.
Yeah.
Okay. So this question's just for you. I don't even want to answer this one. I'm just putting that out there. What did you get into the most trouble for with your parents as a kid?
Oh my goodness. Just picking on my little brother. I'm the oldest. I was a mean big brother for a lot of years. So I couldn't stop. I couldn't resist. So that would be definitely the most, I don't know, that's not the one incident, but that was definitely the most frequent transgression for sure.
Okay, I will relate to you. I'm also an oldest sibling. And so, yeah, there's just things that we do because we're the oldest and we're in control, and we repent from those as adults. So when we have our own kids, but hey.
Yeah, we made it. And he survived too. So we're good.
Yep, builds character. Okay, what is your most used emoji when texting?
Great question. I think it kinda goes in seasons, right? But it's nothing wild. It's like a thumbs up or the praying thank you hands. It's like, are those thank you hands or praying hands? I don't know, but one of those 2 probably is the most used one.
Not the poop emoji.
No, but my we did have to tell my grandmother that that's not chocolate ice cream because she thought that for a while.
My gosh, grandparents and texting is my favorite. Okay, and this last one's really easy. What is one book you're reading right now?
I've been reading a book by Eugene Peterson it's a book it's actually on the book of Revelation. It's called Reversed Thunder. And it's not at all really like an end times book as much as how the book of Revelation is really meant to use its imagery to evoke your imagination and draw you into prayer. So beholding the Lord and praying into the mystery of who he is and what he's doing rather than like decodifying the future. So I've been kind of reading through that and and reading Revelation like in that lens. So it's been fun.
That sounds like a great book. I have not heard of that one. I mean, you can't go wrong with Eugene Peterson, anything he writes, but that sounds fascinating.
Yeah. Reversed Thunder. Yeah, it's on.
Reverse Thunder.
Yeah. St. John and the Praying Imagination. I think that's like the something like that. It's like the subtitle. It's fun. I don't think it's one of his well-known books, but I found it somewhere and it's been good.
Yeah. Okay. This is one of my favorite questions to ask guests when they come on because I feel like I get the best book recommendations. So thank you for that, Charlie.
There you go.
Okay. So you passed flying colors, all the questions. You
We
did
did
so
it.
great.
Lightning round.
So now we're going to jump into what we're talking about today, and that is leading cross culturally. And we'll talk about the aspects of that is vulnerability, being relational. And this is such an important topic because I know when missionaries are surveyed, one of the top reasons they leave the field or there are issues, things that stress them out, are so often team related or relationship related. And relationships are critical for us being able to work together and fulfill the purpose God's given for us on the mission field. If we don't do these well, I mean, it's hard for us to serve well. And leadership is a key
Absolutely.
part of that. And as we're jumping into that, Charlie, share a little bit about what you do at Gateway along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. So at Gateway, I lead a team of what's our missions team, or we call it our global ministry team. And our team builds relationships on behalf of our church with different ministries, churches, and ministry leaders, in many different nations. And so it's a cross cultural team. And we have, a pastor that works with Africa and one that works with Latin America, Europe, Asia, like that. And so they kind of work within a pretty much a cultural or geographic context. Um, and they're working cross culturally. We're a cross cultural team, or a multicultural team, I should say. And then we're just doing things to equip leaders, build relationships, look for ways to collaborate. And we also set up short-term trips for members of our church congregation just to go and serve and have an experience serving and learning how God's moving in another context. So,
I am
yeah.
so grateful for the work that you do and the entire Gateway Church does regarding missions. It's a beautiful thing to see a church so deeply involved in and passionate about missions.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're so grateful. We love it. Love it that it's in our pastor's heart, our leadership's heart, and we get to go out and make friends with a lot of great people. So,
Yeah. Well, and we love the relationship we have at modern day with Gateway. It's been a blessing to us as well. So then let's step in for a second to your backstory. So you shared the countries that you served in. What was leadership like for you, whether being under it or being in it while serving in Zimbabwe and Mexico?
yeah, absolutely. Great question. Well, I was so young when I moved to Zimbabwe, but I was really kind of thrown into the deep end. I was 20 years old and
Wow.
I'd been there 2 weeks. I was a part of a team there was 8 of us on a team and we would travel in the southern part of the region and we would go into a city, live there for a month to 6 weeks and do a about a 3, 4 week, we called it a mobile Bible school that was the forerunner to kind of a big crusade. We worked for an evangelist who would come in and do a big crusade outreach, but we would work with churches and believers for 3 to 4 weeks, teaching Bible subjects and discipleship methods, so that it was the idea was like build up the church, equip the church to so that you don't just have a big event and leave, but they're equipped to do follow up discipleship after. That was really the heart, and and then we were getting that big event ready as well. So I'm there about 2 weeks. We're a team of 8 of us. I'm the second youngest on the team, and we go to the first place we go, which is in Blantyre, Malawi. We're there and there was one like main director, team leader. So we're there 2 days. And that night he calls me in his room, hands me all the money, puts it in envelopes. This is for electricity. This is for security. This is for food. This is for fuel. And he says, "Hey, I'm going to Zambia for 3 weeks. I'll be back the week before the crusade and you're going to be in charge of the team." And
Oh my gosh. You just got
so
thrown
my,
right in.
oh, right in. So leadership was like, every morning we would wake up, we'd have like a team devotion time, and then I'd kind of, as the leader, go, "Okay, what do we do today, guys?" And they would say, "Well, I think we need to do this." I'd say, "All right, let's do that." And we would just, so it kind of started there. But you know what? I learned the ropes, and we made it through a couple of those, and then you slowly start to no longer be the new kid on the block. You're familiar with it, and then you begin to make decisions and lead and so forth. So
And so the people that you served with initially, was that more of an American missionaries? Was that a cross-cultural setting or
that
was
was a
that
cross cultural setting. That was when I first went, myself and another American and about 7 Zimbabwean Shona Zimbabwean guys.
yeah.
Oh, we had an Australian with us for like a month on our team. He was short term, and the other American was only there for about 3 months, and then was back. So then the next year, it was me and 7 Shona guys. And then the second year I was there, or full year I was there, we had 2 ladies from the UK join our team. So we had a half that year, we had a Swedish guy. So it's kind of always a cross cultural, but the bulk of it was a Zimbabwean team with a few international people sprinkled in.
So you've kinda always led in a cultural setting then.
Yeah, I think for the most part I have. Yeah.
Wow. What would you say are some of the unique challenges, some of the unique, aspects really of leading in a cross-cultural setting versus maybe one that's not?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the first thing that has to happen before you can really lead is um the bond of trust that you develop with the people you work with has to begin to reach a tipping point where it overcomes their preconceived assumptions, or their prejudices, if you will, their prejudgments, their assumptions of um whatever that is. This is what, for my case, it might be this: all white people are this, or Americans, or this is the way Americans are. This is the way Americans lead. Or it could be a denominational context. It might be this is the way a Baptist or a Pentecostal or whatever is, or men are this way. But they're going to have certain common experiences, and some of those are going to be defense mechanisms of this is what I haven't liked from what I've seen in the past, and they're going to reserve some level of trust until I want to see what you are. And so, um, you've got to be patient, and you've really got to seek to establish a bond of trust that I think begins to, when they're with you, they feel, there's something distinct. And you're helping maybe rewrite a script of some of what they've experienced by intentionally just showing them who you are.
So building trust and having the patience to recognize that's gonna take a while. And you mentioned one of the ways that you did that is by letting them get to know you as a person. What are some of the other ways that you worked to establish trust?
I think I think paying attention. I remember back, especially those years in Zimbabwe, um, y- and it's just, first of all, you got to understand there's no way around being the new kid on the block. If you're new on a missionary assignment, it's okay to have your new season. You're learning, you're taking everything in, and the way you're learning is you're looking at the way the traffic flows, the way the laws are enforced, the way people eat. You're looking at all the customs, and you're comparing to your experience. And then you're seeing the contrast and stuff screaming at you. And, I was on our team, and then after I'd been there like a year and a half, we had 2 other international people join our team, and I got so annoyed by their questions. They're like, "Why is," "Why is that this way, and why are people doing that?" And and they don't even
Yeah.
realize they're verbalizing every single question, but I was annoyed for like 3 minutes until I realized, "Oh, that was me," like, just a year ago. That was me. And but also I realized, okay, there was a grace that was extended to me as I went through that learning curve. And so, um, but I think that uh, you kind of, as you get around that learning curve, you begin to realize ways maybe I was coming across to the people I'm working with that I didn't see at first. And I
Mhm.
realized, oh, you're giving me grace here, you're giving me grace there. And just learning, um, I mean, we lit like the team I led, we would be out for 4, 5, 6 weeks living in the same home. And so you're nonstop working and living together. So there was little things like there were some things I did. I remember um I was managing our budget and our all of our food purchases. And there was sometimes shortages on things, and it was like, well, we just won't have that. We're just not going to buy that. And I was just making a budgetary decision, and it triggered a perception of like, oh, you're just um it, it triggered a much deeper relational, almost historical dynamic of like colonialism, and you're telling us we
Oh.
can't have this, we can't. And there's a tension. And then when I was so new, I was actually blind to read body language, facial things, and realize there's a problem because their culture is kind of mask what you're feeling and don't let it be shown on your face. And
Mhm.
you had to actually learn just to read people's eyes very closely. So the first couple of times, it's like I realized, oh, there's been a problem for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was totally oblivious to it. You work out that problem and you learn through it. And then in a later season, we had other international guests join our team. They said something, and I knew our team by then. And I instantly look over and I watched this very subtle facial body language, and I'm like, oh, okay, yep, that was a problem. And so it's like, then later I go over and I sit down and with the team, hey, this is what happened, isn't it? And I just and they're like, and then that I think those were some of the things that established a deeper trust, because then it was like, okay, he gets us. He
Mm.
understands us. And then because then I go over and I just, help the other side understand, hey, here's what you got to know. And here, if you communicate this way, you're sending a message that you're not intending to send. Oh, we're so sorry, and but they realize, okay, he gets us. He cares about us. He has our interests at heart. And then it's like, I think trust deepens, and you start to lead um with greater, weight, or I don't want to say authority, but momentum. You can get things done because you have that bond of trust. So,
Yeah, that "he gets us" thing is huge because, we can even see that play out in the US or wherever somebody's passport country is, in the sense that if we're with people of the same culture, we still know to kinda check out their personalities and what are their triggers and what are the things that make them happy and what are the things that are difficult for them. So we understand that from a personality perspective. But a challenge that you're bringing up, that I think is pretty evident is when you're in a cross-cultural setting, you have not only different personalities, but you've got different cultural things that you're completely unaware of. Like you said in the beginning, you could have never known what those little looks meant, but you became an active student of the culture to try and figure out what those things are. And that's something that everybody can do in the culture they're at. And probably something a lot of people are doing is really studying the culture, trying to find out those nuances. But then, Charlie, you also made yourself open to discovering your blind spots. And that's not something that everyone does by far. What were some of the ways that you invited people to speak into your life to say, hey, when you do this, Charlie, it's really offensive, or that's driving me crazy? How did you make yourself um, vulnerable in that space?
Yeah, I think it was fairly natural in that if your desire is to really be in unity with the people you're working with, it's like after I mentioned, realizing, oh, I've hurt someone, offended someone from a I was just blind to what I said or did, how I came across, and you work that out. Uh, I remember in those words, more or less, saying, "Please let me know if I do this again. If I would you please." But I also realized, um, it's whether personality or culture, it's probably going to be a lot for them to actually come forward and say that. I think we got there, but I realized it's probably on me more to be um, take the extra mile or take the extra step to lean in and go, "Hey, did that come across okay? Was everything good with that?" So I think it was even better for me sometimes to just after a meeting, after something, if I had any doubt, um, and then it's like even that I think builds the trust because they see, oh, you're leaning in just to double check, just to make sure. So they see the intent of the heart, and that helps open it up where they would feel comfortable. Now, you've checked 3 or 4 times, they're like, "No, we're good. No, there was nothing, don't worry." But then maybe later there is something and they feel, "Oh, there's an open door. I can come in and share."
So going in with a posture of humility and then just keeping that door open.
Absolutely. And I think, you're talking about blind spots. One of the or I think there's it's important just to have a balanced approach because realizing there's one side I think of many of us that it's like when you get married, you've got all the different scenarios, right? Like, do you put the toilet paper where the roll unravels going over the top or behind it, and and like whatever way you grew up with is best, right? We we do our, the cups upside down in the pan in the cupboard or right side up or
Yeah.
whatever, right? All of these little scenarios, and your default is my way's better. And I remember just moving to the mission field was the first time I lived in a country that used the metric system and kilometers and liters and everything in the metric system than our English standard in America. And and then you just see all the little things, and you do see things where you're like, why do they do things like this? My ways, you have a default. My way's better, but I realized like the metric system is actually way better.
It's
Everything is so
amazing.
simple. Yes,
Anyone who
it
has
just
moved overseas, like, you fall in love with the metric system, like, why do we not use this
I
everywhere?
know it. I know it. And you start to see like there are some things that work. I like the way I grew up with better, and then you realize, but there's actually some things that are done that make way more sense and are so much better than the way I did it. And so I think both extremes. You can have people come in and just think, um, my way is better. And what happens if you communicate that too much, you will actually build a resistance because the things that you will have people less on board with you in the areas that matter because you over vocalized your superiority in too many things that don't matter, like, I don't know. And but the other side, I think, is, also coming in and just like, I need to apologize for everything. Um, and um, everything is superior, right? That kind of, I think, come in with a humble posture, but come in, really it's about connection.
That's powerful what you just shared right there, that recognition of what you're feeling on the inside and the preferences that you have because of the way you were raised. And then also with a desire to honor both cultures. It's not better isn't the word. It's
Yep.
what is something that I like from here? What is something I like from there? And then I do think sometimes you do recognize in cultures there are parts of, I would say, an American culture that I don't love. And there are parts of overseas culture that I don't love. And so how can we take the best of these cultures and really bring them together? And I think that's what a good leader does, whether it's a work culture, a cross-cultural setting, is they're looking to see what is healthy and good biblically in this culture and what is not healthy biblically, and how can we make this better while respecting the essence of the culture. Like you said, major on the majors, minor on the minors. I mean,
Yep.
so many of us who have moved from a time orientation society to an event orientation society, you just get crazy, but people being late to things or things not starting on time. I think that's such a common one. And there's so much anger. And like you mentioned earlier, all the questions, why is it like this and why is it like that? And so you're recognizing these feelings inside of you, but then you learn to make adjustments and say, one is not better. In fact, there is some beauty in this because these people are here very present with me because they're not worrying about where they're going next.
Exactly. Exactly. And that the maybe the bigger picture outcome is not we're gonna, you know, change this, that, or the other to the most perfect way of doing this kind of ministry, this kind of
Mm.
model. But really, the whole idea of that cross cultural element is that through the meshing of us doing life and ministry together, God's enriched. God is using you and the flavor, the texture of your life, your culture, your personality to enrich my life. I'm so much more enriched by, you know, um, really probably by just growing in the grace to appreciate things that are easy to appreciate and extend grace where I need to extend grace, and then realize the same is happening with me. I'm being, received and appreciated. I'm being tolerated and, there's forbearance and all of that is just it's God enriching our lives um through mixing us. I mean, that happens every day with just different personalities, and then it
Yes.
happens on a cultural scale. So yeah,
Absolutely, and just being patient, I think, in that process, like you mentioned, it's we're not going and even if you do recognize unhealth or things that need to be changed, go slow, be patient because
that's right.
Lord knows there's unhealth in us and things need to be changed. And so if we are hoping that people will be patient with us, man, we got to be patient as well. And some things aren't going to change. And that's okay too. As you said, major on the major, minor on the minors. And trust the Lord, I think, to guide you into what needs to happen and let the richness of other people change your own life. I mean, I know for us, after 10 years of living abroad, I came back a different person. And I'm sure for you, what was that transition then to leading in the States like for you after all you learned about leading cross culturally, living in other countries? What are some of the biggest lessons you brought back into now leading in an American setting again?
That's great. It's a great question and great just summary of what you said there, Stephanie. I think it's so good. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, well, two things. So I made two moves. I made a move from Africa to Mexico, and I was in a northern state, so that almost felt like a bigger move culturally than Mexico back to Texas. Because and it may just be that I was more frequently up in Texas, just from proximity, could come back a little more. But certainly there's a cultural jump. But I think in a leadership context, it's just after you're in a few different places, you just realize the things that actually you feel more is just the humanity of all of us, right? People are people. Like we got different accents and different customs, but really it's fear, jealousy, pride. These kind of human things are really, I think, what our real, you know, where our leadership goes to work, more than, you know, like, just whatever your food preference or your clothing style or your music style or whatever that is. So, I think that just the diversity of experiences, people, all of that stretching just kind of gives you capacity to deal with even just the human side of personalities, people. Um, yeah,
I would totally agree. I think your not even just ability to handle, but your eagerness for differences really changes. I think when you haven't had that exposure, everything feels different. Every personality feels different. Every cultural thing feels different. Every age or gender feels different. But the more you've been in a variety of experiences, you just go, okay, this is life. This is humanity, and this is how God made us to be. And you think about heaven, it's all cultures, all
that's
people
right.
together in the same place. So there is almost like a curiosity, I think, sometimes that you get too after having living abroad. Like, oh, I would love to know a little bit more about your story. I would love to
Yep,
know about the kinds of foods you eat, or what was your family life growing up, or what are some of the challenges that you face. It really changes you profoundly as a person. I don't even know if we sometimes realize that when we're in it. I think it's when we get out of that context, when all of a sudden you can kind of look at yourself and go, man, I appreciate, Lord, some of the things that you've done in me. And I want to bring that now into whatever new context I'm in. Charley, question for you. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see missionaries making when they're leading in cross cultural settings? What's one thing you just wish you could tell them?
Yeah, such a great question.
And maybe this comes from a mistake that you made. I mean, that's some of the biggest life lessons we learn are from flubs that we had.
Sure. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's probably, gosh, a number of them, but, a few of them, I think, and this is in any leadership context, but it's also true, and it may be some personalities more than others, but expectations. If we put unrealistic expectations on ourselves, we're going to be frustrated. We're going to think, so I think, it's Craig Groeschel has a quote that he says a mentor shared with him where, most people you're going to accomplish far less than you think you are in the short term, but you're actually going to accomplish far more than you could imagine in the long term.
That's so good.
And just it's that patience, that idea of, yeah, I don't know the numbers, but there's this, the analogy of like like a fruit tree, like an orange tree that, like for 2 years it grows and there's no oranges, and third year there's like a handful, and then there's like 5, 7 oranges, something like that. And then it kind of bumps up to the next year, like, I don't know, 20, 30 oranges. And then it like goes to like 250 or something. There's this exponential curve. And obviously Jesus used fruit bearing and seeds and harvests and all of that for a lot of his kingdom. And I think you just have to be present in that season where the seed is in the ground, you're growing, and then you're going to enter a fruitful season. Um, but you have to give yourself the grace. And so unrealistic expectations is one. Um, I think another huge one um is just isolation. I think isolation is a problem that, is a challenge in the missions context of just being alone. I think one of the biggest challenges that we run into really is ourself. And I think God made us weak on purpose because that's where we lean into him. It's where we grow. It's where we have to walk by faith. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. Um, but I think when we're left with our weakness and we don't know where to reach out for help, reach out for growth. So I just definitely, I think this was true in my life. There was a season when I came back from the mission field. The first year or two I was here, um, felt like God did more in me than through me for maybe the first 2 years I was at Gateway Church. And I remember at one point just, um, I'm at home and I'm reacting to things with my emotions, my anger, my temper, and I'm like shocked at myself. And I almost said in my head to the Lord, like, Lord, where did this come from? Like, what has happened to me all of a sudden? And God was like, oh no, this didn't come from somewhere. I just immediately had, just had this, it was this, he was speaking, just this thought process. He was like, this was always in you, but I now have you in a place where I have um, sh- nutrients in the soil where you are to heal so I'm letting it out.
Wow.
And, and I just think sometimes you can be in a place and on the mission fields and then, when you're living in a cross cultural, faraway context of, I don't know where to turn and really just be vulnerable, be real and say, I need help. Need help with my leadership, need help with my emotions, my soul, my marriage, my relationships. And especially if you're in a context where you're raising support, it's like, I know these people that love me, but they're also supporting me. And
Yeah.
you wrestle with the fear of, if I'm transparent with someone and let them know I'm struggling, am I going to raise their doubt and weaken support? I mean, it's a real fear dynamic that you can deal with. And I think that's the perfect way for the enemy to kind of stunt your growth, just keep you isolated, because it's when we're I mean, you got to have safe people, but it's when we're vulnerable that we connect deeper, and that, it's when we're humble that we receive grace. And so that's actually could be a thing that keeps us at one level from growing to the next. is just leaning in where here's where my weakness is. This is my invitation for his strength to be made perfect in my life.
And that last point is so strong too, because it really ties in even to your first one on met expectations. When we don't even know sometimes, or not unmet expectations, unrealistic expectations. I think sometimes we don't even know if our expectations are unrealistic until we process them in community. So getting in community,
It's
not being in
absolutely true.
isolation, it is the answer to so many things. And like you said, really seeking out those safe spaces. So those are great. And Charlie, I love what you shared today because had we done this interview, let's say 20, 30, 40 years ago, this would have only been applicable for the majority in a actual cross-cultural setting abroad. But nowadays in the United States, for anybody who's listening who maybe supports missionaries, which I know we have some of those listeners as well, we have cross-cultural settings and multicultural settings all throughout the United States, throughout England, throughout Mexico, throughout every country. Right now, there's so much immigration and people going back and forth that it's difficult to find communities where there is not some cross-cultural or multicultural aspects. And so what we've talked about today is really applicable for anybody in any space that they are at. And like you said, there's some general things that I think can help any leader. And then there were some things that we talked about today, I think that are specific to those kinds of contexts. But man, you cannot go wrong when you dig into humility, like you said, patience, taking time to build trust, vulnerability, making that relational investment, um, asking those questions, like you said, what are my unrealistic expectations? What are what are some ways in which I can make myself more open to people so they can get to know me as I get to know them? Those are some really great things you shared today. So I just appreciate it. And thank you for sharing it in the context of your own story and being vulnerable with us here today, too. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Stephanie, thank you for all that you're doing and that modern day is doing, not only to just resource and equip missionaries, but encourage and really provide this resource of knowledge, best practice, and bringing just different voices in. I'm so thankful because the work that you're doing, whether you're supporting missionaries, whether you're on the field, it matters. It matters. We need every single gift, every single type of person, ministry, calling. We need your gift and what you're doing matters. And thank you, Stephanie, for just being a voice of encouragement.
Oh, I'm grateful. And thanks for being one of those voices we invited on. It's so great to be able to look at these topics that everybody wants to know more about, like today with leadership and teams and relationships, but to hear from somebody who has that missions experience, who brings in a voice that we can all relate to. Because we go, like you said, that he gets us. I think when we listen to you today, Charlie, we say, he gets us. He knows where we're coming from. So thank you again. And how can people get a hold of you or find more about Gateway if they'd like to learn more?
Absolutely. So our church website's gatewaypeople.com. So gatewaypeople.com. You can go to global.gatewaypeople.com. There's a little more on our missions ministry. I'm not super active on social media, but you flip the order of my name. I'm at Elliot Charley on social media. And then we're Gateway Global on social media as well. So
Fantastic. And we will post links to any of the resources that you mentioned here today, Charlie. And we just encourage everybody else to join us for our next episode.